Hello to all of our lovely guests who are joining us right now. How is everybody?
Hello,
Well,
how are you
thank
doing? I'm doing
I
great.
Good, good. I'm doing well as well. Thank you. So, to everybody that's watching, I am going to disappear pretty quickly here in a moment. Just going to say a few things to get everyone settled. If you are watching, by all means, ask questions in the live comment box. We will try to get to them. If we don't, it's not personal. We're trying to work within a certain time frame. So, feel free to ask. And if we can't get to them, then definitely head over to the Coach's Corner page. I'll post a link to that and they'll be sure to answer them there as well. Try to keep things on topic if possible. I think that's about it. Am I forgetting anything?
That sounds
Sounds
like a good
good.
start.
Sounds
Sounds good.
good. All right. Well, I'm going to disappear then and hand it all over to you, Duke Rongvalder.
Thank you. For those who don't know, I am Duke Rongvalder from the Middle Kingdom. I authorized in 1990, and I've been fighting about twice a week since then.
Hi, I'm Duke Eliyahu. I live in the Middle Kingdom. I've been a knight for 37 years and fighting and studying a number of different forms as well. And used to be a sport fencer and fight choreographer and a number of other things. And I am a teacher as well. So that's me, Tristan.
I'm Viscount Tristan. I started martial arts in 1980 and SCA fighting in 1983, was knighted in 96, and did over 25 years worth of SCA combat, and then went on to establish my own dojo teaching Aikido, which I started it when I was 36, 37 years old. But teaching's always been a passion of mine and helping people find their greatest potential in them. And part of that is analyzing and figuring out what works and then guiding them to that. So that's what my interest in this project is. In order to get us started here tonight, I did want to say that I really appreciated everybody participating in the poll for what topics of episodes that you want to see happen. This one was the second one in popularity on the list. The one on boxing footwork, we pushed that to next week because Bronis and Sean are both on vacation. Bronis has got by far the biggest set of material on boxing footwork. I've studied a great deal of it too, but we wanted to have those two part of that. So we've just switched episodes from next week to this week. But we're going to keep going with those polls. So we're very much interested in what you want to hear, what you, the audience, wants to hear. So we'll keep going with those polls about every other week or so to get our episodes lined up. So with that, the topic for tonight is going to be feints and fakes, which includes deceptions and traps, and how to manipulate your opponent to make them easier to hit. The goal is to not have to do things the hard way. You want to do them the easy way. And the way that we wanted to start this was with a deception that I think everybody learned in their probably first couple of months. I think they've certainly fallen prey to it, which is the rising snap. Or somebody goes to throw a shot at your leg, you lower your shield, they raise the sword up before it gets there, and they hit you in the head. Or conversely, they feint at your head, you raise the shield, and they hit you in the leg. This is a pure, simple deception, and I think everybody can relate to that. And so that's where we wanted to start. Like, what makes that successful? One thing that I ran into as a young fighter was, as soon as I found that worked with brand new people, I was using that thing all over the place. Like, anytime it would go, like I can, because I was fast enough to make them worry about their leg, and I could get that shoulder to drop, and I'd send it sailing into the helmet. And I overused that thing so much that all my opponents got used to it. And then I'd run across intermediate or advanced fighters and it wouldn't work at all. But I'd see a skilled fighter be able to do it and make it work. And I was like, I noticed there was a big difference. And an advanced fighter told me this, and it was very profound at the time, because I said, why does it work on some, pretty good fighters and it doesn't work when I do it on them? And he said, it really depends on what your opponent is thinking at the time you throw that. If they're all ready and poised and just watching and waiting for you, it won't work. But he said, if you wait for that moment, look them in the eye and wait for that moment where they're looking at you ready, like they're expecting you to throw something. And they're waiting and they're waiting. Don't throw it then. wait until they decide, okay, I'm not going to wait anymore. Now I'm going to throw, and you throw it at that moment, and the percentage that it will land is more than doubles. It almost triples. It goes from being a low percentage technique to a high percentage technique. And that was the first opening of the door to watching what was going on in my opponent's mind, watching what their intent was, and not just saying, oh, there's an open head or an open leg that I'm going to try to shoot into. It was kind of that first step into watching, studying, and manipulating my opponent. What would you guys say to that?
Well, I think what you're talking about here is the essential understanding of human perception that is necessary to be able to manipulate that perception in order to fake your intention so that people will perceive you're doing something other than what you're actually intending to do. So, and there's perception. So you were talking about the focus of their attention, and the best time to throw a misdirection is when they're not focused on it. They're focusing, like most people, when they're focusing on attacking, they're more susceptible to a feint because they're not thinking about their defense. Their defense is on automatic. And so they go to block something, they just twitch and block. And that's when they're open to it because they're thinking about what they're doing. They're not thinking about what you're doing. So there's that perception, but there's also just the mechanics of optical perception. Movement towards the human eye is harder to pick up than movement across the field of vision in either direction. And it's possible to use that as well. So if you move directly towards someone's eye, you're cutting down, particularly if you're moving in a straight line, you're cutting down the time they have to respond. And if you do things in the right sequence, which we'll be talking about, they will then tend to then overreact because they think they're behind the curve, and now you've moved them out of position. So it's understanding the mental perception and also the optical sensory perception as well. And the simple start of the leg shot fake headshot uses a lot of that, because how you move, are you doing it with, and there are lots of different ways to do it. Are you dropping your hand? Are you dropping your shoulder? Are you bending your knee? How are you getting them? And is it coming down? Is it going forward? How are you getting them to perceive that it's a real threat? Because they have to perceive it's a real threat in order to block it. If they don't perceive it's a real threat, they're not going to block it, and it doesn't work as a feint. Of course, if you do it right and they don't perceive it's a real threat, you can finish it, and it was because it was real. So,
Wrongwalder?
I'm making notes for myself too. I remember you talking about that being one of the first things, Tristan, that clicked for you was that that drop shoulder fake. As a left-hander, for me, the first was that opponent's sword side leg. I found that for me, picking that leg off became instinctive for me, and that was one of the things I had to build on. And what I learned, the first things I learned from it was, when I first threw it, I didn't know what I was doing. So I think therein lies one of our lessons. Those of you who are mid-level fighters, likely you're going to already be doing some of this stuff. So some of the analyzing you should be doing is looking at yourself. What are you already doing that you're unaware of? So you can become conscious of it. Like for me, this leg shot, typically when somebody came forward, I kept my threat pointed at their upper body. So as they took the step forward, their defense rose, and then I could simply step backwards and throw a leg shot without thinking. So now I can tell you exactly why it works. At the time, I didn't know. So that'll be one of the things to keep in mind. A lot of what we're talking about here is going to be new, but you may find that some of this you're already doing you need to go back and become conscious of what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Sure. In the setup for this show, that we were discussing this a few days ago, and that was, and Eliyahu had the perfect term, which is a tell. And that is when you start to understand what tells your opponent is not only able to see, but what he's looking for, that will profoundly change how you lead somebody into a feint or a fake. And what I noticed was, as I was facing people that were very inexperienced and usually very nervous and twitchy, is small movements, they wouldn't even notice them. Whereas if I was facing an advanced fighter, a very tiny movement of my shoulder was enough for them to start to respond, because they knew that the movement of the sword shot was going to come through that shoulder. And if that shoulder moved, they needed to move an account. So as I would start regularly facing more advanced fighters, my tells would get much, much smaller, but I was still able to affect their movement. And then I'd face somebody who was inexperienced, and I do the same thing, and they wouldn't notice it at all. Like I could do this full on, oh, I'm faking you, and they're just standing there staring at me. And I'm like, you know what? I need to make this bigger so it looks like they've got a bite on it. And
so
then
it happened to me years ago. I was in a big interkingdom tournament, and so there were a lot of people I didn't know, and this guy came out to fight me, and beautiful harness, just really beautiful harness, and he had took his starting position, looked great. I'm thinking, I have no idea, and you don't know when you're fighting people from all over different kingdoms, you don't know their level of experience, and so I'm doing these subtle little movements.
You're probably reading his harness and going, this is not a brand new guy.
He's
really
not biting.
Really great kit.
He's not biting.
Got some experience.
Not biting on anything. Yeah. And finally, I looked at him and I just reached out and hit him, because he had just authorized that day, and he wasn't reading any of the subtle tells that I was doing. And you're right. The more experienced someone is, the better their ability to read, and so the subtler your misdirection. But it comes down to understanding your own movement. So, and I do everything I can to eliminate any unconscious tells, so that when I do move, it's with intention, and I can send an intentional tell to somebody. So it's like, well, the idea of a tell I got from a game. I think it's called poker. I think it involves cards and gambling. I'm not sure. But some people playing poker are just stoic. There's no tells, no indication, no giveaways. And then some other people, they're moving, and all their tells are hidden in chatter. And I know some really good fighters. I think of Duke Stephen Beckham. He's always moving and changing position and doing stuff, and you never know. All of his tells are hidden in the chatter. And I try to do the opposite, where I'm not giving anything away. So any movement is my opponent has to consider its effect.
Right.
That being said, if you're trying to develop your own feint, your own fake, and in this case of the leg feint, headshot, you have to start to understand where your commitment point is, and where you can actually redirect, and how to imply that threat in one direction while actually not having committed to it. And that's tells are understanding your own body language and somebody else's body language as well.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ronald.
Thanks. There's a gentleman in our group who was knighted just a few years ago. And one of the things we came up with for him, because I like to have something quick that I can interject into somebody's fight while they're fighting that cues them. So what we came up with for him was 1, 2, 3. And that's the simplest I could make it. So number one, and it had to be in this order. Number one, you have got to be aware of where you are in the fight. You can look at that on a much more global scale and say you need to be aware of where you are as a fighter when you're training. But in the fight, you need to be aware of where you are. Where's your stance? Is it where it belongs? Are your hands where they belong? Is your mind in the fight? All those kinds of things. Once you are comfortable with that, you go to number two. Number two is where you tie into your opponent. And for what we're talking about today, number two is it. You can't have, and what Eli's talking about is you can't have number two without number one. Number two is where you tie into your opponent. You become aware of where his stance is, where his weapons are, where his intention is, where his threat is. Number three is simple. Number three is ending the fight. So Tristan had mentioned this earlier. We were chatting, and I don't know if this was during this or before, but talking about throwing the shot. For me, the shot shouldn't be thrown without intention, but really, if you're going to throw to wound or kill someone, you should already know what's going to happen before you go to number three. And that's what number three is. Mm-hmm. So keep those things in mind. If what we're saying isn't making sense, you need to go through those. What I do in number two is once I do number one and I'm aware of where I am, I go to number two, I become aware of where my opponent is. Now I can use those to alter where he is. And so I can go to number three, mm-hmm. if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. To wrap up how beginners and beginner to intermediate fighters look at feints and fakes, one of the things that I remember seeing a lot, and I remember even doing this a lot way back in the day, was you would think, I just need to wave my stick around and that's going to scare somebody into moving, and then I watch them move. And that is completely a waste of time. What you need to be able to convince somebody is the body mechanic and movement of where that stick would be going in a really good shot. And then that's the tell that you get. And if you start doing that, you'll notice that, like we talked about before, beginning to intermediate fighters will respond differently than advanced or intermediate to advanced fighters will. And you can, just by doing a few of those simple, like you're starting a blow motion, but then stop, watch their reaction, and you can get a gauge of the kind of experience level you're probably dealing with. And you can do it before you wind up having rattan all over your body, and learning the hard way how experienced somebody is. You can watch their response. And usually like we talked about before, when you do a really small shoulder feint or a body feint and somebody doesn't respond at all, you know that they're inexperienced. If you wave your stick in a useless way, an advanced fighter won't even move. They know that that's not a shot and they're not going to respond to it. So you can use those to kind of feel somebody out when you don't have no idea the experience level that they have. And I had the exact same thing happen that Eliyahu had years ago. Don't look at somebody's harness and judge their experience level by how good their armor is, because there's some great armor you can just go with your Visa card and set yourself up with.
And what you're talking about goes back to something that Duke Sean talked about, which is the OODA loop.
OODA loop, yeah.
The orient, observe, decide, act. When I've taught that to people, I usually phrase it there. It's the same concept, but observe, analyze, adapt, and act. So observe your opponent when you move a certain way. And it's just what you're saying. You move a certain way, how do they react? Mm-hmm. And you file that away. You move this way, what do they do? And you put those pieces together, you analyze them, then you adapt to that, and then you put that in action. And this is something I've seen Ron Valder do a lot. He'll do seemingly these different moves, seemingly unrelated, and then he puts together like this 5-level feint that is because what we're talking about is 1-level feint. And you notice when everybody talks about it, they always do this, right? They're talking about the 1-level feint, leg to head. Then there's a 2-level where it might be a head feint, leg feint, head.
Right.
2-level. or then, and it can go on from there. It's this way, this way, this way, this, and so on. And that involves gathering information from the testing you're doing, observing that, analyzing it, putting it together, and then saying, oh, if I do this, this is how they'll react.
Sure.
And when it works well, they have essentially responded to everything you're doing, opened themselves up, and you simply have to hit them.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. I find that I don't often throw much more than 1 or 2 shots. But I don't also think of that as one-shotting an opponent.
Right.
All those feints and fakes you're talking about, to me, are part of a combination. It's one of my pet peeves, are people who work on these shot combinations. I got a 3-shot, a 5-shot, a 7-shot combination.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's nice, but what if your opponent leaves? What if you did it and now they know your pattern? It has no purpose, no intention, like we were talking about earlier. There's nothing wrong with throwing 3, 5, or 7 shots if that's what it requires.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had opponents where I've had to, just like Eli said, I've had to stack information. I've done the feint and the fake or a test shot and gotten information, realized, well, if I do this, I get this advantage, but I also sacrifice this other one. In essence, I'm looking for 2 things. What can I do to open them up to get my shot? And what can I do to control their ability to throw at me? Whether that be angle, making them think defensively, or stop thinking altogether. So those are ways to tie down their weapon. I have also done the setup, get them out of position and fire, and then get hit for it because I did not include shutting down their weapon. So usually I have a series of things that I will stack for that specific purpose. I want to open them up. I want to keep their weapon from firing. Then I can fire with relative impunity. I don't like playing odds.
Right. Well, and that's where we're getting in now to the intermediate level, or the more advanced or intricate. Like, what's the skeleton or the criteria of creating good feinting and faking? And one of the things I wanted to mention before we jump on, if you do, one of the analysis things that I did like and got a lot out of is when I'm facing a new opponent, I will look at their armor and see where the tape marks are. If they've got a lot of tape marks in one area, that usually tells me they've got a hard time covering that target. The read that I get off of that is they're probably scared of that thing. Like if they got a lot of tape marks down above their left knee and they've got maybe a smaller shield, they're probably working on trying to block that leg shot. So I'll just throw out that fast leg shot and I'll see, if I could get it. Because if there's a lot of tape marks there, you might just get it. But if you see them really fast twitching to get to that leg because they're getting tired of getting hit there, now you really got the lead for, well, guess what? A rising snap might be exactly what they're set up for. And so even with those marks, you can read a little bit of what your opponent goes through. And it's another testament to wiping your armor down and not having your own tape marks showing for other people to potentially read. Just as
before a tournament, I retape my sword or repaint my shield and clean everything up so I don't have any of those physical tells. Yeah. But I'll look at somebody before we fight. I'll look at them and I'll look at where's the damage on their sword, where is the damage on their shield, where are the marks on their harness, and I'm also looking at like their foot position and the range and estimating all of that and gathering all this information. And after one fight, this fellow came up to me, he said, you were freaking me out. I said, what do you mean? He said, yeah, you were just standing there at the beginning and you were looking at me and then you kind of stood back and you nodded and then you came on guard. And he said, I was completely freaked out. It's like, I don't know what he figured out, but he's got something. It's like, so I walked him through the process and I said, well, I can see the damage on your sword is from the midpoint back. I can see, that you like, so I can tell you like to where your range you like to be. I can see where the damage on your shield is. I can see where you were starting with your feet. I can see the forward lean in your body as you were starting. So I said I knew exactly what you were going to do, and he yeah. So yeah, the point of that is though, don't give that away. Don't give that information away to people.
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to address first how to actually throw a feint or fake?
Yeah, let's cover that. Let's do it.
Okay. Okay. I've run into this as it became a skill of mine, and I tried to convey that to others. I had difficulty trying to convey how to fake somebody. What I ended up running into, which I found very common with someone I trained or not, when they tried to throw a feint or fake, to me, kind of the same thing. It was different than a shot. You know, this is how I throw a shot, and I'm working on feints, so I'm doing this. Well, if they're different, that in itself is a tell. Okay, so if you do a feint, so I've had people do the foot stomp or like Tristan mentioned, the you circle the sword. You know, if that's how you throw your feint, and then you throw shots differently, you've told the person these are not real. When I stomp my foot and wave my sword, it means I'm going to do nothing.
Right.
And you've actually put yourself in danger. What I've found is the best way, and it's actually allowed me to get shots when I don't have time to set them up, is we all hear this. When you're in the fight, you're in the fight. There's no hold. So your mind needs to be in the fight. That said, there are times you have to disengage and re-engage to reset your mind. That's fine. But when you're engaged, you need to be, and in this case, you need to be ready to throw a shot all the time. Every step and move you take should be, I'm going to throw this shot. 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 The difference is you don't. Okay. It's different mindset than I'm looking for position. I'm looking for position. Now I'm going to throw. Most people do that. So one of the easiest things for me to watch for is when that attitude, energy in them changes. When they go from threatening and moving around and testing, and now they're ready to throw. It's like, oh, now he's going to throw. I will simply step back. And then they go, oh, I can't throw. And then they go back. I can come back in again. So they tell me when they're going to throw. If your attitude the entire time is, I'm going to throw this, 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 your opponent has to respond to every single one of those. As long as in your mind and your body, you feel like, I am throwing a shot, I'm choosing not to, as opposed to when I'm ready.
That same initial process of deciding and committing your intent without the physical expression coming all the way out. That's the difference between a feint where you're just thinking, well, I'm going to wave a hand and I'll watch. There's no intent to that, is basically what you're describing.
Yes, intent is the big part of this. Remember, we're talking about this, we're getting beyond your basic techniques. At this point, we're becoming tactical. You are using your techniques. Okay, so that's what's happening here. And if every move is done with this attitude, what you begin to find, I'm going to start sliding into something a little more advanced here, but what you begin to find is every move you make is a threat. And if everyone's a threat, you're getting information every half second from the fight, from your opponent, constantly. So I'm skipping ahead here. Sure. But each of those is a threat, and that gets me information. So starting with, for me, for the number one, that's what I'm talking about. Your attitude has to be, before you engage, I'm going to throw this shot. I'm going to throw. And you choose not to. That's one of the best ways I can describe what a feint looks like. It's a real shot that you don't actually throw.
Right.
Okay. Let me back up a second to just the physical techniques, which I think you started to mention, in that it has to look real. That means that you have to understand how you really throw a shot. And however you really throw the shot, you have to then be able to redirect. If you throw a feint in a different way, it's not credible. It has to look like a real threat. That requires this understanding of a person has to understand how they move, how they generate the blow, how they throw it. And certainly some kinds of blow generation, force generation tend to commit the weapon earlier and tend to therefore only go where they're started at. They are not as easily redirected. Whereas something like this, where you're keeping this distance and you can move this way, you have not really committed to anything. You can drop a knee and still throw at the head. You've still got this the cocking mechanism. It's still loaded here when you do that. Whereas some of the bigger looping things require that the circle continue. It's a redirection of a circle into a feint. So it's you're changing the radius of it. You're doing something else. So there are different ways to do it. The principle applies, though. You have to understand how you throw a particular blow in order to be able to throw it in a way that looks real, but isn't, but is redirectable. And that can be with the body, lying with the body, with the arm, with the feet, with the hands, with the position, all of those things. It can be with timing, it can be with hesitation, it can start, stop, and continue. There's a number of different ways to do it. The first part, though, is to understand how you throw a blow.
Yeah, somebody just posted up as a comment that I need to get a mirror for behind my pelt to see what my opponent sees when I try to fake. That's very profound.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I think
Never
a
appreciate
training.
how much you tell or how much you're off when you try to throw a fake versus a real blow until you see yourself. And a mirror is a great low tech way to do it. You could do it with a camera too, but it's direct and immediate when you're looking at a mirror. So
I think a training partner as well
yeah,
is really useful, and that's what we used to do is pair up with training partners and say, okay, I'm working just on this, tell me, does this look like a real leg blow? Yeah, okay. Now does it still look real, but I'm changing? Where's that commitment point? How far out can I push that commitment point before I can redirect it? If the closer to my opponent I can move that commitment point, the less time they have to react to it. And the easier it is to then redirect it.
Sure. And as we get to the structure of intermediate fighters getting more into feints and fakes, one of the things that I noticed in shifting from the being an idiot, waving my stick around, hoping to get somebody to bite on it, the biggest jump I noticed in my ability to fake people or guide them into traps was to move my body, because intermediate to advanced fighters will watch the body. They won't watch the hand or the tip of the stick or the blade as much as they will watch your body shift. They'll see where your hips are turned. They'll watch to see how deep your stance is, if it's really bladed. I used to watch for that a lot, where if I get that person who's got like in a fencing stance where one foot's well behind the other, I always like going behind that front leg, because they've got to turn that way, and it's a kind of a clumsy, slow way to turn. Whereas if you go in front of them, you're walking right in front of their hips, and that's where the most dangerous. They've got the most offensive capability when you're standing right in front of them. And so if you make them move their feet around, now their brain starts thinking, well, where does my feet have to move? It tends to have less readiness with the sword attack. Not that they can't, it's just a little more difficult than if their feet are planted. And I think this is a trap that is easy to fall into with the stuff that you've seen quite a few different people talk about this last week with pel work, doing dynamic pel work where you're firing as your feet are moving and just not getting your body used to plant the feet, and now the sword goes. And then if you want to move the feet, the sword stops, the feet move, and then they stop, and then the sword goes. Like, you break out of that to have a more fluid and dynamic attack. But within that fluid dynamic attack comes where you're feinting by moving your body. And I used to like doing this. One of the first things I realized as we would get into traps, and people still do this to this day, is we're facing each other. I walk up to you and fight, or you walk straight up to me and fight, or we walk together straight towards each other and fight. That's so very common. This also helped me break it up. As I approached an opponent from far away, I'd step offline one side, off the other, and I'd sort of zigzag. So as I came in, they weren't sure what angle I was going to or where I was going to come in, and they'd have to turn their body or shift it somehow. And I found one of three things would happen. Either they would not turn their body enough or at all, and suddenly I would have stepped to the offside and I had a whole lot of target area on one side, or they would overturn. They'd worry that I was going around them, and they would, in their panic, they would overturn. And that's what a fake really wants. You want somebody to overcommit to where you're faking to, and that creates another opening that you can take advantage of. And I was just doing it with my footwork. I wasn't moving sword or shield at all. No commitment from the weapons. It was only where I placed myself. And then the third option is they turn perfectly to face exactly where I'm going, exactly when I'm going. And that happened very rarely. Most often there would either be somebody would underturn, they would overturn or overmove, or they just get frightened and just back away. And in that sense, then I control the fight because I'm applying pressure and tension, and they're responding. They don't know what to do, and so they back up. And now I've got the initiative. So 3 out of 4 options there go in my direction. And the fourth one is they have to turn or move accurately every single time I change directions. And if you're making them respond to you, even if they're doing it successfully, now you are controlling the initiative within that fight. And you've not committed anything. You don't ever get near that point, like Eliyahu took, that point of no return, or that point of total commitment where you can't do anything else than complete that shot that you were throwing anymore. So as you get into the intermediate levels, try working on feints with your body and using positioning and range control to feint people, to apply the pressure. And I think Brownus would use the term tension, is controlling tension by making sure they don't have a rest and relax out of range time for them to form up a plan and then kind of, okay, I'm going to go execute this now. Don't give them that. Don't give them that mental opportunity. Apply that pressure and keep them moving and make them turn and respond accurately. And if they don't, you've got a big opening. So I found that to be a very useful way to look at feints and trapping people.
I was thinking of the different types of feints. It's so weird, you do them so long that they all blend together. And I think that's the ultimate goal, is your types of feints, the basic method for the type that you use, blends all together. So as I'm listening to you guys so clearly describe some of it, I'm hearing being able to throw, probably the easiest one for people to start with is a location fake. So with a location fake, you are putting pressure into a spot where a person's opening is open. When they respond, then you can learn that when you threaten that open spot, this other spot's open, and that's your shot. That's probably the easiest and simple one to work with. A simple example is as we'll assume same-handed, so right against right, you move your stance over so your threat or your feint is to their center line. They close up, which opens up their head, and then your shot is to the head. We could use the leg one. When you drop down to start a leg shot, does their shield come down? Then you have the head. There's a simple location one. There is a time type of feint or fake where somebody responds, and then everybody takes a certain amount of time to do a certain thing. So 2 quick examples are somebody who, when you feint their head, they do a nice block, but that shield blocks their eye line and then quickly comes back down. So they can very quickly, too fast for you to throw, pick up your shot and recover. But you notice for that moment, they're blinded. So I will use a time fake in that case where I fake the head, I let them finish their block, and then I complete my shot.
Or the
so I'm not going
old school spear pump fake. where you start your thrust, somebody goes, whoa, and they swing over, and then you just hit them right.
And then you just throw, you haven't done anything different. You started it, you stopped it, and you started it back up again.
Perfect. Yeah.
Because you know their timing. Another would be position, which is what Tristan was just talking about. He's shifting his body around, and what he's not telling you is happening there is as he's moving, he's not, I don't describe moving as movement. I describe it as moving your stance to a new location. So what he's doing is as he zigzags, he's putting his stance here, here, here. And because it's his stance, every one of those is dangerous. So his opponent needs to respond. Yeah. And if they respond incorrectly, he has created an opening. Maybe a shift to the shield side makes them turn, but leave their lower body, which pulls their offense and defense away from their legs, allows him, now he knows, well, when I step to the shield side, I'll just throw a leg shot because they will actually move their equipment out of the way. So he's using his location as one. Yeah. And then a fourth one, which I'll use, is energy. So there are people who get reactive. They feed off of a person's energy. I tend to be very calm when I fight, but I will give the external appearance of sudden tension or energy, and it will bring an opponent up. And it's really nice as an example, somebody who counter shoots, and they counter shoot because you are coming, so they throw. And a lot of times that's good timing if you know what's going to happen. If you don't, then you're crap shooting. Mm-hmm. So what I will do as an example is if I got somebody who's going to fire when I give them that energy, when I'm ready to hit them, I will give them the energy, wait, allow them to complete the shot, and then fire and pick up an arm back or whatever it is that happens to open up. So ultimately what you do is as you learn these four, as I see them, you begin to combine them. So for a better fighter, I begin to combine all of them to try to get a shot. Right. But when we're talking about practice, you need to do exactly what Eli and Tristan have both pointed out is try this one. Like Eli said, move around. Where are you in your shot? So where's your position? Where are you? Where are your hands going? And then like Tristan's talking, using a Appel dynamically, moving in on it on angles. And he's using zigzagging as an example because it's one of the best. Mm-hmm. I have come to describe it as compound circles. So they can be flat, they can be round, they can be deep, and they can be high, and they can be low. So you can slide. What he's doing is he's circling this way. Mm-hmm. What I tend to do is I tend to circle this way, in and out, and then I will drop the circle down low and in, and then up and out. Mm-hmm. So that's how I'll use my position to get people. Mm-hmm. So when you're practicing, just like you always do with practice, pick one of these: time, position, energy, location, and work on just the one until it feels good, and the others, and then begin to combine them.
Yeah, that's a great breakdown and a great tip. I haven't heard anybody describe feints and how to develop them in such a systematic way. That's really excellent. The one thing on that fourth one that strikes me is as you, and that is an advanced concept.
The energy?
Studying the energy of what somebody wants to do and setting them up to invite them to do it. That takes a very high level of confidence, A, in that you've read them correctly, and B, that you're ready to deal with that you know they're going to bring an ace in the hole out. What they're throwing at you is their best favorite thing. And that's can be scary to get into when you're a mid-level fighter or you're dealing with somebody you know that is a lot more experienced than you. They're like, do I really want their best trick thrown at me and I can handle it? You know, that can test your mettle a little bit. And so if you do get to that point, maybe that's a tactic that's going to be a crapshoot to you. Because if you went up to somebody like a Logan or a Bronis and said, all right, I'm gonna bait you into what I know you want to throw on me, chances are you're going to lose that crapshoot. But you can also set up by using the third one, that movement to say, I want to approach him from an angle that he doesn't get approached at. I want to see where I can hopefully start to make him a little uncomfortable. And this is where if you have somebody that's at your level or you know their favorite tricks, the stuff that you know they love to throw, and you figured out how you're going to counter it, then that fourth approach is really a great one, because you have the benefit of having the odds of knowing what it is they want to execute on you. And if you know their blueprint, now you can use it against them. It is a great tool. But it can be one of those things. If somebody's much better than you or really skilled, it could be a danger. But you can always make your blueprint different so that you're not walking right into the mouth of the lion, go around to a side, or to try to change things up so they don't have their best execution that you're inviting.
Exactly. The combination of these are what ends up ultimately making the difference.
Absolutely.
So I totally agree with you in that. Building on your example, what makes it work for me is exactly what you're talking about, is combining those. So inviting somebody to throw the thing that they want to throw sounds, on the surface, it sounds dumb. I mean, it's what they want. Why would you just give them what they want? The reason is that you're almost guaranteed they'll use it because they want to. And if you're offering them what they want the thing.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start combining other things like location and time, well, first of all, you know what they're going to throw, but it's really good. Well, how do you deal with that? Then you add time. We change when we engage our opponent.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now we're deciding what they're going to throw, when they're going to throw it. And then you start adding things like position, okay, which you were talking about with your zigzagging.
Mm-hmm.
Now what I do is you step slightly to a position where they still feel like they can get what they want, but the angle's slightly off. So it's no longer their perfect shot. It's a weakened shot, but it's still what they want. And their mind says, I can still get it.
Mm-hmm.
So now what ends up happening is you've essentially told them what to throw, when to throw it, and how to throw it.
Mm-hmm.
So you find any opponent that you think can beat you, and you tell them what to throw, when to throw it, and then you stand where you want to be and then tell them to throw it. The odds are you can block that shot or take advantage of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what you're trying to create with these.
Well, that's the process that will make that opponent much less scary than he usually is to you.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and part of that we talked about, another episode was about observing fighting and what to learn from watching fighting. And one of the things you can gain from that is an improvement in your ability to do that information gathering and to analyze. And you can see what somebody wants to do, and you can see how they tend to do things. And the better fighters have the ability to gather that information more quickly, more accurately, with fewer tests, fewer techniques needed to evoke that information from them. And so you can see, in this situation, this person, generally I can see they're really itching to do this. They've tried this thing several times. It hasn't worked. They really want to try this. And I mentioned being a shorter fighter, the taller guys always want to throw the big scorpion wrap over my head. So that's perfect. That's great, because I can see if they have a tell when they're starting to go up for it, when they're starting to do that, when that's what they really want to do. That's perfect. You're letting me know what you're going to throw. I can choose when it is. I can choose where you're going to throw it. And now I know exactly where it's coming, and I can cut the arm off or do something else.
Right.
So yeah, it was a great way of describing it, putting them in the position where they feel an irresistible inevitability of the shot that they want to throw, so that you know it's coming and you can deal with it.
No. So do we, I think we're kind of getting to a natural break point here. Do we have any questions for us?
We do. We do have questions. All right, I'm going to switch the view. Hello,
Okay.
everybody,
Well,
again.
the
Good
lovely
to
Vesper.
see you. All right, so our first question we have, with COVID-19 limiting official fighter practices and events, would you recommend using a form of shadow boxing to practice everything you're talking about tonight?
Yeah, if you can't get a mirror, a shadow box would be probably the least of the three that I would do. Mirror being probably number one, camera number two. I do like Eliyahu's recommendation. If you have somebody that can watch you and read you and say, "Did this look real?" Um, a shadow would be a possibility as well. Have any of you done shadow work?
I have done shadow work and Pell work, Pell work particularly to practice not only, well, I have a whole bunch of Pell work stuff, but that hitting while moving. So it's not that moving, setting, then hitting, and then moving to that exactly what Ron Voller was talking about, Tristan was talking about, where you're hitting while moving. A Pell is good for that, but in with social distancing, it's possible to have a train. You don't have to be within sword range. You can be standing a distance apart where you don't even have to be wearing armor and observing someone and say, okay, throw your headshot. Let me see what it looks like. Let me see, okay, first of all, eliminate tells from the basic shot. If we're talking about the basic location feint, eliminate the tells from that. No winding up, no cocking back the arm to do it. Are you going straight from your guard position to the shot? And practice that until you have that, and then the observer can help, and you can do that with a proper social distance. You can do that from 12, 15 feet away, masks, so on. You don't even have to be wearing armor. And then practice, have an observer watch your ability to change direction, where that commitment point is, as we talked about. You can also, for any of us, if you videotape that with a camera and post it here, we'll all be glad to look at it and comment and give you some advice as well, and help you in that way and be an observer. The problem with mirror work is if you don't know what you're looking at. And that's the one caution I would add to that. Mirror is great if you have gotten to a point, to a level where you can be self-critiquing and self-correcting. But
That
if
is
you're
very true.
not, I think it still helps to have a coach. Oh, if only there was something like a coach's corner where we could offer that sort of thing, right? So
Excellent point.
good.
Yep.
Thank you, gentlemen. We have another question. The question would be, how long does it take to recognize an opponent's feint so you can pick it up and react to it?
So how many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Roll
Yeah,
Tootsie Pop?
yeah.
And this
Enough.
is going to be a wild card for how good is the opponent's feint? Is it a rough kind of clumsy one? You'll spot it in minutes. Like you probably learn in one sparring session of 5-10 minutes to spot it and not pick it up. But you get somebody who's really cunning, who's got a really good, their feint looks exactly like a blow because it is, and you have no choice but to respond to it. That will take longer to spot. And one of the things I did want to cover a little bit in this episode, although we're getting kind of to a wrap up point, maybe we could do this as a second episode, is how to foil feints, how to not fall for them. And one of the ones that I find was the most common advice I would give to younger fighters coming up is, if you have any doubt, just step back. Don't stand there looking at their hands, trying to predict where that hand is going to go or the sword's going to go, or try to outwit them in a hand fight. Just back up. Don't don't fall for it. If you're not even a squire yet and you're facing some duke and you feel a bit of a pressure, you don't know what to do, just back up a little. But if you don't, he's probably going to outhand you, and that's going to probably be some kind of misdirection. He's going to have you twisted up into a pretzel, and then he's going to smack you. because misdirections work. That's, you know, the magic and illusion industry is built entirely on misdirecting people into where they look so that they're not looking at what's really happening.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else that would like to comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
Think we're solid on that then. All right. For now, that looks like that is it on the questions. Let's see. Viscount Tristan, would you mind giving us a little overview on the Coach's Corner?
Sure. Yeah, the Coaches Corner is a group much like the virtual fighter practice one. It's focused on not only coaching and training fighters, but how to learn how to be a better coach, and that is try to get people to achieve their potential through training. And because teaching and training is a skill all on its own, you can be a really good technician and not be a good teacher. You may have really great skills and not know how to transfer them to people. And so what we want to do is with this group is have like a roundtable type situation where we can have younger and inexperienced trainers and intermediate trainers learn from each other how to get the most out of people and how to help other fighters come along and learn about the coaching, training, and getting people up to speed on how to analyze their fights, how to get the most out of their training, and not just from sparring, but doing all kinds of different work. We're sharing videos on things like boxing footwork, which we're going to cover an episode on next week. Some of the stuff you don't get from sparring alone. And so that's our basic focus. And we want to help people do that, because that's how the sport's going to grow, is by people learning, and not just by the throw them in the deep end of the pool method and hope they figure it out.
I had somebody send me a question directly. We've got time to, I don't know how long we planned on.
Go ahead.
They asked about patterning and what they call deliberate openings. I would call baiting. So they're, to address them, they are techniques for exactly what we're talking about, ways to gain information. So mostly what I've been talking about is, and we've been talking about, is ways to threaten somebody with different tools, time, position, energy, and location, to force them to give us information. Other ways to do that is baiting, which I would put under position. With baiting, you're purposefully leaving parts of yourself open to see how they respond to them. Do they want to throw at this? This kind of gets more specific about, I forget what we were talking about earlier. I'll come back to it. So it's another way to do it. Baiting is risky because it's like that situation of giving somebody the opportunity to throw what they want to throw, and will they do it? I've done it before. Baiting is risky. You have to do it combined with the other things, position, location, and things like that. So typically in the middle, if somebody looks like they want something, I will sometimes give the bait, but at a range where they have to reach a little bit farther, or at an angle where they feel like they have the shot, but it's slightly off. So it's a lot like what we talked about, having somebody throw what they want to throw.
And find out how badly they want to throw it. Are they willing to throw it badly enough that they'll give up their posture, or they'll go out beyond their range a little bit because they're so eager? You can need energy that way. Yeah. Yep.
But it is risky because you're giving up a target to do that. So it's not the kind of thing where you stick your head out and wait to see what happens. Right. You give that bait at the time that you want, at a reasonable angle, for just a second or two to see what's going to happen, and then you take it away. If they don't do anything, they don't do anything. You don't wait for them to respond. You give it and you take it away. The other patterning can also be done. I find this works better on a mid-level fighter or a newer fighter. If I find at higher levels, patterning will get you caught. What we're talking about here is where you, in the middle of your process, you tend to focus on a particular area. So you move around, you do your threats, and then you fire a leg shot, bang, and then you back out. Oh, you move around, threat, bang, leg shot, bang, leg shot. And they're always right at the edge where you're just kind of tipping off. So they get the thought that, when he really wants this leg, So they often begin to make some kind of alteration to their stance, which is really what you're trying to do, is make them not be in their comfort zone. So let's say you're doing this leg. So now they start fighting with their shield lower to pick up that leg shot that you're throwing. Now they've opened up the head. Now that drop shoulder that we talked about in the very beginning, where you drop your shoulder to feint the leg and fire the head, you've totally set them up for it. You've told them with your actions, I want that leg. And their response becomes, no, I'm going to adjust so you can't have the leg. And then you step in and say, I'm going for the leg. And then you hit them in the head and they're surprised. The problem you have with that against a higher level opponent is you fired an area more than a couple, 3 times, you will be taken advantage of. If somebody fires at my leg more than twice, I assume that they're beginning to pattern, and I'm looking for where the next shot is coming. So now I begin to watch for one of 2 things in the process of everything else I'm doing. If they throw it again, I already know how they throw it because they just showed me. So I will probably take that arm.
Yeah.
Or I'm looking for the next time they throw it, or usually the third, maybe the fourth, if you want to really push it. I can be guaranteed that that shot is not going to be that shot, in this example, the leg. So I will sometimes fake the block and then take the kill because I know the shot is not going to the leg, it's going to my head. And this goes back to self-awareness. Okay, so what Eli talked about, if you're not aware of where you are, you're dead in this situation. If you are aware of where you are all the time, when somebody patterns you for that, let's say the leg shot to the head shot, you can actually fake a block, recover the block, and then get a kill out of it because now they told you exactly what they're going to do. Their patterning and their feinting becomes their downfall.
And you've actually just answered a question that someone asked on Facebook about teaching their opponent their tells by giving them a fake tell and then breaking the pattern of that. And he said that it works on great on mid-range fighters, but not on upper level fighters. And I think the reason is that he's probably going to that too often. He's probably, as you said, it's, he's doing it not just twice, not just, he's selling that tell so hard that it's clearly either it's predictable and he's opening himself up when he's doing it, or it's clearly he's trying to sell it too hard and he's going to go somewhere else. And so I think that you answered that question.
And that is a good question. I'm glad we covered this before we wrap this up. And the thing that struck me about this is, do high level fighters ignore tells after a time? And I don't know if I'd use the word ignore, but you only really address blows that have gone past that point of commitment. And that is usually advanced fighters. They don't overblock and they're in a position where one minor movement will intercept a sword block, or they can dodge it with a very small movement. They don't move too early. For a feint to work, or a feint works best when the opponent moves too early because they're twitchy. And that's where they get caught. They get caught by committing their defense or their movement to before that sword goes past the point of commitment, and it can then be changed around to strike somewhere else. If you're blocking and dodging is so disciplined that you move only when that sword is committed, then you're not going to fall for feints. That's where it seems like those tells are ignored. They're not really ignored. A good fighter is going to watch everything, but he's going to be very careful not to overmove or move too early, because he knows he's going to get manipulated into something stupid if he does that. That would be my take on the ignoring.
There's a thing that, as we've talked, we've gone round and round it without actually saying it. I'm realizing as I listen to us.
Good. Nail it. Nail it right to the wall.
What's that?
Nail it right to the wall. Get to it. Let's do it.
Feints and fakes are designed to gain information from your particular opponent about his particular weakness at that particular time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Feints and fakes are not about, I have this feint that allows me to hit the opponent in the head. that's nice, but there are people with, we were talking before we went online, we were talking about positions that different people fight in. And different people have different areas that are just plain old shut down. Okay. You can't just hit that area because it's automatically blocked. You can. You can use the feints and fakes to get them. But that said, if you simply have this, you've got your drop shoulder fake to the leg that hits the head, and you're really good at that, but that's not the guy's weakness. Maybe he has, like what I will typically do as an example, a drop shoulder fake for that shield leg, and then head. I keep my head blocked and I change my body position to pull the leg out. So I don't actually open up my head. Okay. So I have a response to that. If my opponent is only trying to do that fake, it is never going to work. Mm-hmm. Now there are other feints that pull me out of position that do work. That's what these feints and fakes are for. You're going to poke and prod and threat and feint and fake until you find the thing where the guy goes, oh, it's a thing where he responds to it. And if he responds to it, they respond to it. That's the thing that will get them. Mm-hmm. For those who know me, there's a heroic fight that went particularly well for me. It's gone round and round on the internet because there's been some good video of it. And everybody looks at it, everybody goes, ooh, because the shot I throw was really amazing. To me, it's not amazing because Kenrick, my opponent, was so good. It took me, I don't know what it was, 8-10 minutes to figure out what combination of movements, what bait, and what position he needed to be in for me to execute that shot. So while everybody else goes, ooh, threw a cool shot, I'm like, yeah, no. It took me 8 minutes to figure out that was the one to do. I didn't try to throw, I've got some, like everybody, I've got some shots I throw particularly well. Everybody has their thing. I didn't try to do those. That shot on him was not one of my favorite shots at all, but it's all I had. I figured out if I threat here, his shield goes here. And then I learned this is how fast he was. And then I learned this is the bait he likes to throw at. And then I learned if I throw at this angle, he'll be at this position. I had to figure out all of those and then execute them at the right time to get one shot. Mm-hmm. So I'm starting to ramble here, but the point is all these skills are designed to figure out what that individual opponent's weakness is. Not just I have a set of fakes I use. Now you're back to I have a combination of shots, just some of them happen to be fakes. You're still crap shooting.
Right.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm getting to that question. I just have to say thank you for taking the time to be here and to share all of this information with everybody. I know it's kind of a restless time, so having this outlet has been really amazing. So thank you for doing
Thank you,
that.
Vesper, for lining up this episode and
thank you.
Scheduling it and moderating it for us.
Aw, thank you.
Yeah, really, that's what's allowed everybody to have this, is you doing this. And again, to everybody, we said this 1,000 times, we're going to keep saying it. Please ask your questions. Absolutely. When we do these videos, ask them, post them later, send us questions in private, whatever works for you. Ask the questions.
Get on Coach's Corner. We're open forum. We'll love to chat and help you along.
And
you can tell we love to talk about fighting, so ask us questions.
You're in the right place then. I will post a link to the Coach's Corner after this episode on the Virtual Fighter page, just so everybody has an easy access link to you all. And I believe that is about it. A lot of thank yous are coming from people on Facebook. So we're going to have you again next week. Very exciting. And we'll be sure to post that event as well.
Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Yes.
We appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you all so much. Have a great evening and weekend.
Thank you, and have a happy 4th.
Yes, happy
have a
4th.
happy holiday, guys.
Bye.